Ja, je kunt zo'n slechte gewoonte dus afleren, maar eenvoudig is dat niet. En dan hebben we het nog niet eens over echt hardnekkig gedrag. Bijvoorbeeld een zware rookverslaving. Hoe kom je daarvan af? Amerikaanse en Engelse wetenschappers denken daarop een antwoord te hebben gevonden. Zij maken gebruik van psychedelische middelen zoals psilocybine, de werkzame stof in paddo's.
He remarks that he begins to walk on air. Here and there, a forced, irrelevant giggle.
You drinking? How did it taste? It had no taste. How did it look? Colorless. Now, would you tell me your name, please?
Wetenschappelijk onderzoek naar psychedelische middelen is niet nieuw. Tot aan de jaren 70 zochten onderzoekers op grote schaal naar therapeutische toepassingen. Onderzoek naar verslaving gold als bijzonder veelbelovend en omvatte tientallen onderzoeken waaraan zo'n 1300 proefpersonen deelnamen.
There was a research group in Saskatchewan, Canada, that was using LSD to treat alcoholics. They were actually trying to mimic the effects of delirium tremens, the DTs. So they thought, aha, we now have a drug that can make people temporarily insane that's physically pretty safe. So let's use that to kind of mimic the DTs. But what happened was pretty amazing. People started having these mystical experiences.
Deze mystieke ervaringen leidden ertoe dat een hele generatie in de ban raakte van psychedelische middelen.
And certain figureheads were really proselytizing or preaching about the merits of psychedelic drugs. And this is important. They weren't preaching about them as medicines as such. They were preaching about them as drugs that could save the world.
De wereld veranderde, maar overheden kregen ook te maken met de negatieve gevolgen van deze middelen.
And what they were seeing is young people showing up into emergency departments with some really serious problems.
That really frightened the authorities.
En dat had ook gevolgen voor het net op gang gekomen wetenschappelijk onderzoek.
All of the medical and scientific research in humans stopped with LSD. Right now, we're just picking up on those old threads and trying to proceed cautiously. It took a very long time for the thread to be picked up, and I think time just had to pass.
Maar de psychedelica krijgen weer hernieuwde aandacht. Want nu hebben hersenscanners en computers het mogelijk gemaakt om diep in het brein te kijken. En dat is nodig, want veel psychische klachten zijn nog onbehandelbaar. Ben Sessa is als psychiater al lange tijd geïnteresseerd in mogelijke toepassingen van psychedelica.
We don't understand nearly enough about the brain. We're kind of at the level in psychiatry and understanding mental disorder now that we were with the physical body about 500 years ago.
Op dit moment komt het wetenschappelijk onderzoek naar psychedelica weer op gang. Matthew Johnson en Robin Carhart-Harris, beide psychopharmacoloog, waren gastsprekers op een congres in de Mozes en Aaronkerk om hun prille wetenschappelijke bevindingen over psychedelische middelen toe te lichten.
Quickly, I'll show you some data from our...
Matthew Johnson doet al meer dan 10 jaar onderzoek naar verslaving en drugs aan de prestigieuze Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. Robin Carhart-Harris heeft het eerste klinisch onderzoek naar psilocybine in het Verenigd Koninkrijk opgezet.
So some of the basics. We know that psilocybin is the active compound in magic mushrooms, but more accurately, it's actually the prodrug.
Psychedelic drug psilocybin seems to break down a particularly high-level system in the brain which is related to our sense of self. And there seems to be something potentially useful therapeutically in that breaking away of the sense of self.
Carhart-Harris was de eerste die met een MRI-scanner de effecten van psilocybine in de hersenen bestudeerde. En psychiater Ben Sessa was de eerste proefpersoon die in de scanner psilocybine kreeg toegediend.
One experience that really stands out was where I had what for me was a real full-blown mystical experience, and that was in the scanner. And taking the drug in a scanner as well is an extraordinarily bad place to take a psychedelic drug, confined in a small, cramped metal tube for an hour and a half with a loud, banging, clanking, ear-splittingly loud noise.
One of the interesting things that's come out of our research is that there's a kind of relative loosening and sort of freeing of brain function, and we also see that when we look at the psychology, that people report more vivid imagination, that they perceive the world more fluidly in a less precise manner. It's not so much that consciousness is expanded, it's just that it's changed.
En juist deze bewustzijnsverandering maakt het mogelijk om van een rookverslaving af te komen. Het prille onderzoek van Matthew Johnson richt zich op de behandeling van zware rokers die alles al hebben geprobeerd om te stoppen.
So now I'd like to show you some data that we've been collecting on using psilocybin to help treat addiction. And this is really a marriage of two.
De proefpersonen krijgen in een huiselijke omgeving en onder begeleiding van therapeuten psilocybine toegediend. De combinatie met de therapeutische sessies achteraf zorgen ervoor dat alle 5 zwaar verslaafden na een jaar nog steeds van het roken af zijn.
You don't get results typically this good with cognitive behavioral therapy or really with any other treatment. We've only treated 5 people, so I certainly want to show some caution here. And that's mainly because we're at the beginning phases. This is a pilot feasibility research study. We don't have a control arm or a control condition where people get placebo. But we're very encouraged. And then just anecdotally, by individuals' descriptions, they're certainly saying that these psilocybin sessions were an integral part, the key feature really, in being able to overcome the addiction.
Maar wat gebeurt er nou eigenlijk in de hersenen van iemand die een psilocybine-trip ondergaat?
During normal waking consciousness, as we experience the world, we think this is just how we experience the world, full stop. We don't really imagine that there can be other states of consciousness. What we're doing is developing our own sort of ideas about the world. And when we do that, we tend to constrain our ideas about the world. They become more solid, and we're more confident about how the world is. What happens under psychedelics is that confidence is shattered.
When it went in, the injection, it felt like just being shot down a cannon. With a kind of cascade of colourful kaleidoscopic patterns in the vision. And then into this space, which was like a big white, but it wasn't like a white room because it didn't feel like a room, there were no physical walls. I felt like everything had been stripped away. I'd lost my sense of self, I'd lost my name, my body, who I was, my profession, the fact that I was married and had children and I worked and I lived in a house, and all of that had just disappeared, and I was stripped down to this basic concept of just floating in nothingness.
Als het deel van je brein dat je identiteit bepaalt niet meer werkt, dan kunnen er nieuwe inzichten of ander gedrag ontstaan.
There's a sort of innocence and a sort of freshness to their experience of the world. It's as if it's been described as if they're, going back to the Garden of Eden and seeing the world as it was before they were socialized and indoctrinated and learned all these things about reality. So they're seeing the world as a child does, with a certain freshness.
Door de psychedelische drug worden mensen bevrijd uit hun gebruikelijke denkpatronen en ontstaat er het inzicht dat gedrag en gedachtes ook op een andere manier kunnen worden ingericht. Dat inzicht is volgens de psychopharmacologen erg gunstig voor rookverslaafden, die op deze manier van hun oude denkpatronen en gedrag bevrijd worden.
When one is a long-time smoker, they're used to being in that pattern and it's hard to break out of it.
Addictive behavior becomes ingrained in their personality, they think of themselves as an addict.
With these experiences with psilocybin, people can have just the type of experience that's a real antidote to that way of thinking. I've had volunteers that have laughed at how easy it was afterwards. Not that there was never any craving, and not that there wasn't any difficulty at all. It's almost like the experience instilled with them this strong sense of security. A lot of what we measure is the mystical experience.
There was this cross, like a sort of crosshair thing to focus on the screen. And it felt like, it sounds really silly, but it felt like I was kind of worshipping that. And like it was a sort of symbolic center of all things, and I was on my knees before it. I know. It sounds completely crazy, because, like I said, this isn't the sort of language I normally use. I was able to stand back and reflect and just think, wow, this is so beautiful. This is so awe-inspiring.
What psychedelics seem to do is disrupt that repetitive behavior through disrupting regular states within the brain, sort of motoric, well-reinforced patterns of activity in the brain.
I think the way that psilocybin works is more like an experience that someone has that they learn from, and that can change behavior.
Really, these treatments that dominate psychiatry function to kind of keep things quiet, in a way, keep things under the carpet and in a manageable way so that the patient can get on with life. But they never cure the patient, whereas the potential merit of psychedelic drugs is that they could be a potential cure. They could get at the source, and the patient could potentially be cured for the long term.
En dat is uiteindelijk wat we van een behandeling verwachten. Dat we patiënten blijvend beter maken. Depressieve patiënten, mensen met clusterhoofdpijn, ook andere aandoeningen wachten op een behandeling.
If this continues to look successful, I could imagine a broad application not only to other drug addictions, but to non-drug addictions.
I see too many patients who are stuck and not progressing with their mental health treatments. And if these chemicals can be harnessed in a way to improve those lives of those patients, then we owe it to them to study them.
Ja, wat vindt u eigenlijk? Moet er meer onderzoek naar psychedelica komen om verslavingen en stoornissen tegen te gaan? Ga naar wetenschap24.nl, want daar praten we via Twitter en chat nog even door met een aantal deskundigen. Dit was Labyrinth. We gaan even tussenuit voor de winterstop, maar u hoeft zich niet te vervelen. Doet u op onze site vooral mee aan het groot nationaal onderzoek naar alledaagse stress en ontdek hoe u presteert onder stress. En let op, we gaan verhuizen. In het nieuwe jaar zijn we te zien op zondagavond. Dus tot zondag 20 januari.
It's certainly a calamity waiting to happen.
Volgende keer in Labyrinth. Amerikaanse onderzoekers luiden de noodklok.
This impact of the wave of obesity, type 2 diabetes leading to Alzheimer's disease, yes, it's going to overwhelm both families but also national healthcare systems around the world.